Dear colleagues and friends, on behalf of Bruno David, President of the Muséum National d'Histoire Naturelle, it's a great pleasure and honor for me to welcome you all in Paris. Who are you? BHL members, affiliates, international and local friends, supporters, retired fans of the Biodiversity Heritage Library, speakers from other institutions, from France and elsewhere, who have kindly agreed to take part in today's conversation. So for those who haven't had the pleasure to meet before, I would first like to introduce myself as General Director of Collections and say a few words about the organization of collections in the Paris Museum. First, I should say I've been acting in this position for almost 2 years, together with my deputy and lover, Christine Lefebvre, Director of Naturalis Collections, and with Alice Lemaire, Director of Libraries, sitting there. A man would be nothing without smart women. A bit of history. Except for the Central Library, who has been a unit of its own since the foundation of the museum after the French Revolution in 1793, our collections here at the museum were for several centuries, like in many other similar institutions, widely distributed, not to say dispatched, and attached to research laboratories. The museum was run by an assembly of professors, and each professor had his, I say his because there was no her, okay? His collection attached to his research field and authority. It's only 20 years ago that the first direction of collection was installed in order to rationalize and modernize the management of collections, but also to implement the legal framework, duties and responsibilities that come together the conservation and circulations of collections in a national museum, according to the French regulations. In 2017, we moved one step further in this integration effort, as all collection types, naturalist collections and libraries, were assembled in the same unit that currently counts no less than 200 people, spread all over the garden, but also on the other sides of Ménachon in Paris and also in other locations in the country. Scientists remain actively involved in collection management and research, but we now have a dedicated body of staff and skills for the conservation and diffusion of collections. Altogether, no less than 67 million of specimens and over 2 million of books, periodicals, archives, and objects of a great variety. Only a part of this has been as a record in a digital catalog, and even a smaller portion has been digitized. But the fact that the libraries are now jointly managed with specimen collections provide a unique opportunity to mutualize resources, to improve visitors' or end users' experience, but also, and that's key for today's topic, to bridge and link together a great variety of data who have been historically produced in multiple silos and with different tools and standards. I must confess that unlike my predecessor and most of my homologues around the world, I am neither a scientist nor an administrator. What am I? The humble truth is that I am just a librarian, and I was previously in charge of the museum library. It's in this role that I got acquainted with the BHL community. Together with Alice Lemaire, we convinced, with no big issue, the management of our museum to join the consortium and take an active part in the building of this fantastic digital library. I am grateful to my BHL colleagues and companions who played a critical role in my education. I learned a lot from them and from our meetings all around the world, not only about the specificities attached to taxonomic literature and heritage material, but also on how to struggle and exist, if not survive, in the complex biodiversity data world and networks. This unusual situation of being a librarian surrounded by smart and sometimes very demanding scientists has given me the opportunity to reflect on librarians' strengths and weakness to survive in a place like a museum and more broadly in the biodiversity world. In some way, this position, my position, reminds me of BHL, which is the sole library in the overgrowing graph of biodiversity and natural science landscape. We hear of JBIF, we hear of DISCO, we hear of CETAF, TEDWIG, and so many others, but BHL is the only thing called a library, just like I'm the only guy called a librarian in the board of this museum. So to conclude my introduction of this day, I would just like to share with you a couple of thoughts that might ring a bell to the BHL community and to today's topic. First, librarians have developed a talent in being invisible. They hide with style. Not only they hide themselves behind their desk, the reference desk, or the screen, but they are excellent at serving valuable data that everybody uses without knowing they were bought or curated by librarians. I, of course, appreciate this typically French elegance. But come on, Emily in Paris has come on the screens, and we should make more efforts to show more how useful and stylish you librarians and your metadata are. Second, in the glorious age of the extended or digital specimen, do not forget literature. There is no taxonomy without published article. Taxonomy starts and ends with bibliography. Locally, here at the museum, abusing from my position, I've started to think that all librarians might do more than just take care of their library, so that the people in charge of their collections may at the end believe there is not my or your library or collection, but a national collection for everybody. Right now, we are in the process of redesigning our global collection information system here at the museum. And as we discuss new governance to manage our digital future, many of us, and the first of them not being the librarians themselves, think that the librarians could play a role, a valuable role, beyond their usual scope and boundaries. For instance, take care of monitoring standards and norms for the whole museum, support data structure and life cycle management plans for the community, be part of a wider effort of data curation that might not have solely to do with literature. Why? Because they have no opinion, they have elegance. They're only obsessed with structure and standards. They don't intervene in scientists' struggles and fights and controversies. They are supportive. So yes, why not think of them as a community that could take care of bringing their expertise in digitization and metadata to help with the growl of interoperability to be developed between our many silos of information. I think BHL collections, data and community could play a similar role on the global biodiversity scene. And I am sure that what we will hear next will give us all more inspiration to think in that direction. So thank you all for being here. Special greetings to Gary and Adam. I don't know if they've arrived yet. We're husband and son of our beloved and regretted Connie Reynaldo, former chair of BHL. Later today, we will honor this very special figure of what we now call the BHL narrative. So with no further delay, I will leave the floor to Alice Lemaire and the first friends who will be taking part in the roundtable. Thank you.